Hi, Emma, my love. um, Welcome to Emma's chapter story time. And we're going to finish the last chapters of Pinocchio, and then we'll start a new book, okay? And I'll give you a choice, okay? So let's begin. This is chapter 33 of Pinocchio. See the picture? Pinocchio has turned into a donkey. When nobody answered the door, the coachman kicked it open. "Congratulations, lads," he said to Pinocchio and Lampwick, with his usual honeyed smile. "First-class braying. I recognized your voices and came at once." The two donkeys hung their heads, their ears drooping and their tails between their legs. At first, the little man stroked and patted them. Then he pulled out a currycomb and gave them a good grooming. When their coats shone like mirrors, he put halters over their heads and led them to market, where he planned to sell them and make a tidy profit. There were no lack of buyers. Lampwick was sold to a farmer whose donkey had died the day before. Pinocchio was bought by a circus manager who wanted him to train to dance and perform tricks. By now, my dear readers, you may have guessed what the coachman's game was. This horrid little monster, who looked as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, would regularly travel around the world, luring lazy boys into his carriage. Once they were on board, he brought them to Toyland so that they could waste day after day having fun. Then, when indolence turned the poor things into donkeys, he took them to market. In this way, he had become a millionaire in just a few years. What happened to Lampwick after he was bought by the farmer, I do not know. What I do know is that for Pinocchio, his sale at the market was the beginning of a harsh and miserable period in his life. When the new owner took him to his stable, he filled the manger with straw. Pinocchio took one mouthful and spat it out. Grumbling, the circus manager filled the manger with hay instead. The donkey spat that out too. "So, my hay's not good enough for you either," the manager shouted, and he struck Pinocchio across the legs with his whip. "Ee-aw! Ee-aw! I can't digest straw," said the poor donkey. "Eat hay, then," replied his owner, who understood donkey language perfectly. "Ee-aw! Ee-aw! Hay makes my tummy sore." "What do you expect? Breast of capon and chicken galantine?" his owner raged, giving him another taste of the whip. Pinocchio. After that, Pinocchio thought it safest to hold his tongue. The circus manager left the stable, bolting the door behind him. Pinocchio was alone. He hadn't eaten anything for a very long time, and he began to yawn with hunger. His mouth opened as wide as an oven. In the end, as there was nothing else in the manger, he took a mouthful of hay. After chewing on it for a long time, he closed his eyes and swallowed. "It could be worse, I suppose," he said to himself. "But how I wish I'd stayed in school. I'd be eating a nice ham sandwich instead." When Pinocchio woke the following morning, he looked around for more hay, but he'd finished it all the night before. He took a mouthful of straw. It wasn't exactly mushroom risotto or spaghetti with tomato sauce. "Never mind," he sighed. "I just hope my story will be a lesson to others who'd rather shirk than study." And he sighed again. "What are you sighing about?" shouted his master, bursting through the stable door. "Do you think I pay good money to watch you stand around eating all day?" You've got work to do, my lad. You're going to earn your keep." Come on, we're going to the big tent. I'm going to teach you to jump through paper hoops, he said, and to waltz, and to do the polka with your hind legs. Poor Pinocchio had no choice. He did eventually master these fine arts, but only after many months of lessons and many a blow of the whip. At last the day came when the circus manager was able to announce a grand performance, with Pinocchio as the main attraction. Big posters on every street corner read, "Grand Performance Tonight. Acrobatics and feats of daring, performed by artists and horses, or of both sexes. And introducing the legendary little donkey, Pinocchio, also known as the star of the dance." That's the what do you call it? What do you call it? The poster, big poster. That evening, the big top was full to overflowing an hour before the show began. The ringside seats were teeming with girls and boys of every age and size who couldn't wait to see the legendary little donkey Pinocchio. Toward the end of the show, the circus manager stepped into the ring, dressed in a black jacket, white breeches, and leather riding boots. He gave a low bow. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls," he said, with great solemnity, "the humble, undersigned being at the present time in the perambulation through this illustrious metropolis is desirous to grant himself the privilege, indeed the pleasure, of presenting to this intelligent and distinguished audience a celebrated donkey, which has already had the honor of performing in the presence of their majesties, the emperors of all the principal courts of Europe." And see all the people, they were going to the circus to see Pinocchio the donkey. "Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Let me now beg you to cast your most approbatory eye on this act of indubitable verisimilitude, and to forgive our humble establishment for any eventual inadequacy." This preposterous speech was greeted with gales of laughter and loud applause, which grew into a hurricane when Pinocchio himself appeared. He was the last word in donkey elegance. He had a new halter of shiny leather, with brass buckles and studs, and a white camellia, that's a flower, white flower, at each ear. His mane was divided into dozens of little curls, tied up with red bows. There was a wide gold and silver sash around his waist, and his tail was braided with crimson and blue ribbons. Can you imagine him? In short, he looked adorable. "Ladies and gentlemen," the manager declared, "will I waste your precious time with tall stories about my intrepid efforts to capture and subdue this mammal as it roamed freely from mountain to mountain on the great equatorial plains of the equator? I will not. I will invite you to observe the savage light in its eyes. I will. Picture your humble servant applying all methods of domestication and failing. Time and again I was forced to resort to the subtle articulacy of the whip. But all such kindness, far from soothing the savage beast, merely enraged it further, until at long last your humble servant located in the beast's cranium a small cartilaginous area, which the medical faculty of Paris declares to be the section of the brain which governs hair growth and ballroom dancing. I therefore elected to train the quadruped in the noble art of dancing and jumping through paper-covered hoops. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, judge for yourselves the efficacy of my labors. But before commencing The performance, the circus master continued. Please allow me to announce that in the event of bad weather, tomorrow evening's show will be brought forward to tomorrow morning at the hour of 11 o'clock p.m. The manager concluded with another bow and then turned to his star. Greet the ladies and gentlemen, Pinocchio, he ordered. Pinocchio obediently bent his front legs until he was kneeling. He stayed down until the manager, cracking his whip, barked, Walk! The donkey stood up and began to walk around the ring. You have to imagine it, more than the pictures, but here are the pictures. See Pinocchio up on the high wire there? There's another one. Trot, the manager cried. Pinocchio quickened his pace. Canter, ordered the manager. Pinocchio obeyed. Gallop, came the final command, and Pinocchio began to gallop flat out. As he was careering around the ring at top speed, the manager fired a pistol shot into the air, and Pinocchio fell to the floor, pretending to be wounded. The audience clapped, shouted, and whistled so loudly it's a wonder they didn't bring the roof down. As Pinocchio scrambled to his feet, he looked up into the crowd and spotted a beautiful lady wearing a gold chain around her neck. On the end of this chain was a medallion. On the medallion was a painted portrait of a wooden puppet. That's me. That lady's my fairy, Pinocchio realized, recognizing her at once. Overcome with joy, he tried to call her by name, but all he could produce was a ee-aw, so long and so loud that the whole audience, particularly the children, burst into peals of laughter. He was trying to talk to the fairy. The manager, annoyed, rapped Pinocchio smartly on the nose with the handle of his whip to teach him that it is not good manners to bray at your public. The poor donkey stuck his tongue out and licked his nose for at least 5 minutes, hoping perhaps to wash the pain away. When he looked into the audience again, the fairy's seat was empty. Tears filled Pinocchio's eyes and rolled down his furry cheeks. But nobody noticed, least of all the manager. He cracked his whip and cried, Come on, Pinocchio, show these ladies and gentlemen how gracefully you jump through a hoop. Pinocchio tried 2 or 3 times, but each time he came to the hoop he found it preferable to pass underneath it. In the end, he did jump and got through, but his hind legs got caught in the hoop, and he landed in a heap on the other side. When he stood up again, he was limping so badly that he was barely able to get back to his stable. We want Pinocchio! We want Pinocchio! Chanted the children, who felt sorry for the donkey. But he did not return to the ring that evening. The next morning, the horse doctor came to see him and declared that he would be lame for the rest of his life. Oh no. What use is a lame donkey? It's just another mouth to feed, the manager told the stable boy. You better take him back to the market. When Pinocchio and the stable boy arrived at the market, a buyer approached them right away. How much for this lame donkey? He asked. 20 gold coins. I'll give you 20 copper coins, the buyer offered, but I'm not buying him to work for me. Only for his hide. Uh-oh. It looks nice and thick, just right to make a drum skin for my village band. When the buyer had handed over 20 coins, he led the donkey to a low cliff by the seashore. He tied a rock around Pinocchio's neck, and attached a long rope to one hind leg. Then he gave him a sudden shove so that he fell into the sea. Pinocchio sank right to the bottom. His new owner, holding on tight to the rope, settled down comfortably and waited for him to drown. Chapter 34. Oh, this is still from the circus. My poor lame donkey must be drowned by now, Pinocchio's master said to himself when the donkey had been under water for 50 minutes. It's time to pull him up and start making that drum. He began to pull on the rope that he tied to Pinocchio's leg. He pulled and pulled until at last he saw something appear on the surface of the water. Instead of the dead donkey, Pinocchio's new owner saw a live puppet, squirming like an eel. The poor man thought he must be dreaming. He stood there gaping at Pinocchio with his eyes popping out of his head. Once he had recovered a little, he gibbered, "But where is the donkey?" "The one I pushed into the water." "It's me," the puppet replied, laughing. "You?" "Me," Pinocchio confirmed. "You're trying to make me look stupid, you scoundrel." "Far from it, master. I'm absolutely serious." "But how did you turn into a puppet?" "It must have been the seawater. It can play strange tricks." "Watch it, puppet. Don't think you can take me for a ride." "Untie my leg for me," Pinocchio ventured, "and I'll tell you how it happened." The new owner was curious. He loosened the rope. Pinocchio, free at last, began to tell his tale. "Before I was a donkey, I was a puppet, just like I am now," he explained. "I was even very close to becoming a real little boy. But I was lazy and I couldn't be bothered to study. I listened to bad influences and I ran away from home. Then one day I woke up and found I turned into a donkey, with donkey ears and donkey tail. I was so ashamed it was terrible. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, even you. Then I got taken to market and sold to a circus manager. He said he turned me into a great dancer and acrobat. But I had a bad fall and ended up lame. My master sent me back to market, and that was how you came to buy me." "Yes," interrupted the man, "and I paid 20 copper coins for you. How am I going to get that back now?" "But why did you buy me?" Pinocchio asked in an outrage. "To make a drum skin of me? A drum skin?" "Yes," complained the man. "And where am I going to find another drum skin now?" "Don't worry, master," Pinocchio said. "I'm sure you'll find another donkey." And here's a picture. "You cheeky lad," said the man. "Is that the end of your story?" "No," replied the puppet. "There is a little more. After you bought me, you brought me here to kill me. But then you decided instead to tie a stone around my neck and throw me into the sea. But unluckily for you, master, you didn't reckon on the fairy." "And who might she be?" "She is my mother. And like all loving mothers, she never lets her child out of her sight. She gets him out of trouble even when he's behaved so badly that he doesn't deserve it. So anyway, as I was saying, when my beloved fairy saw that I was about to drown, she sent a huge school of fish who thought I really was a poor dead donkey and began to eat me. And how they ate! I never would have believed that fish could be greedier than children. Some ate my ears, some ate my muzzle, my neck, my mane, some ate the skin off my legs and the fur off my back. One little fish was kind enough to gobble up the whole of my tail." "Good grief," exclaimed the buyer. "That's the last time I eat fish. Imagine tucking into a nice mullet and finding a donkey's tail inside." "Quite," the puppet laughed. "Anyway, once the fish had eaten their way through the outer layers of donkey, they reached the bone, or in my case, the wood. As you can see, that's what I'm made of, high-quality hardwood. But it only took a few nibbles for them to realize that wood wasn't to their taste. And then off they swam without as much as a thank you. And there you are. That's why you ended up with a puppet on your rope." Here's a picture. Ooh. "I couldn't care less how you got here," Pinocchio's owner suddenly exploded. "All I know is that I spent 20 copper coins on you, and I want them back." I know what I'll do, he decided. I'll take you back to market and sell you off as kindling. That's kindling wood, right, to make a fire. Please yourself, said Pinocchio as he dived headlong into the sea. Goodbye, he shouted back at his unfortunate owner. Remember me next time you feel like making a drum. He laughed and swam on. After a while, he turned back again and yelled even louder. Goodbye again. Remember me next time you need kindling. In the twinkling of an eye, he'd swum so far that you could hardly see him from the shore. He was not more than a little dot on the surface of the sea, a dot that occasionally leaped out of the water and turned a somersault like a dolphin in high spirits. As Pinocchio was swimming along, not caring where he was going, he spotted a rock that looked like white marble sticking out of the water. On top of this rock stood a pretty little goat. She was bleating at Pinocchio and beckoning with one of her front legs, imploring him to come closer. This was strange enough, but the strangest thing of all was that the goat's fleece wasn't white or black or even the mixture of the two, like the other goats. It was blue, a wonderfully bright blue, which reminded the puppet of his beloved fairy's hair. Pinocchio's heart beat faster. He set off toward the white rock with renewed energy. He was halfway there when a sea monster's ghastly head rose up out of the water and came rushing towards him. Yikes, look at that picture. The gaping chasm of its enormous mouth was framed by 3 rows of fangs, which would have made the stoutest hearts miss a beat. It was none other than the merciless shark that had been mentioned more than once in this story. For its terrible deeds, it had come to be known as Attila, the scourge of fishermen. The terrified Pinocchio tried to swim out of the path of the huge gaping mouth, but it followed him at the speed of an arrow. Hurry, for heaven's sake, bleated the goat. Pinocchio swam as fast as he could. Swim, Pinocchio, it's getting closer, the goat bleated again. Pinocchio summoned every ounce of strength in his body and managed to double his speed. It's right behind you, Pinocchio, the goat bleated a third time. Faster, faster, or you'll be lost. Pinocchio sped along like a bullet. He was almost at the rock. The goat was stretching out her front legs to help him from the water, but it was too late. The shark caught up with him and sucked him into its mouth like a child sucking a strand of spaghetti. The monster swallowed so fiercely and greedily that Pinocchio landed on his stomach with a tremendous thump. He lay there for a while, unconscious. When he came to, he had no idea where he was. It was pitch black, so dark that he felt as if he'd plunged his head into a bottle of black ink. He listened but could hear no sound. His only sensation was the strong gust of wind that buffeted him at regular intervals. At first he couldn't work out where it was coming from, but then he realized it must be coming from the creature's lungs. The shark had dreadful asthma. When it breathed, it was like a force 10 gale. At first Pinocchio managed to keep his spirits up. Then, as everything around him confirmed that he was trapped inside a sea monster's body, he began to sob and scream. Help, he wailed. Help! Will nobody come and save me? You'll be lucky, commented a voice that sounded like an out-of-tune guitar. Who was that? Asked Pinocchio with cold fear. It's just me, a poor old tuna who's been swallowed by the shark, like you have, replied the voice. What kind of fish are you? There's Pinocchio and the tuna. I'm not a fish, I'm a puppet. Then why did you get yourself swallowed by a shark? I didn't do it on purpose. Anyway, what are we going to do now? Resign ourselves to our fate and wait for the shark to digest us? But I don't want to be digested, Pinocchio howled, beginning to cry again. You're not the only one, said the fish, but I try to be philosophical and tell myself that for a tuna it's more dignified to die in water than in sunflower oil. That's stupid, Pinocchio yelled. Well, it happens to be my view, the tuna fish replied, and views, as our tuna leaders are fond of remarking, should be respected. I want to get out. I want to escape. Go on, then. Escape if you can. Is this shark really so big? Pinocchio asked. More than a mile long, replied the fish, without his tail. While they were talking in the darkness, Pinocchio thought he saw a glimmer of light very far away. What's that light over there? He asked. Some poor wretch waiting to be digested, I expect, said the tuna. I'll go and find him. He may be a wise old fish who will direct me to an exit. I sincerely hope so, dear puppet. Goodbye, tuna. Goodbye, puppet, and good luck. Will we meet again? Who knows, said the tuna. Better not dwell on such thoughts. And look who's there. It's Geppetto. Okay, baby, so that was 2 chapters, chapter 33 and chapter 34. And I'll make chapter 35 in the next video. Okay? I love you. See you soon.